It is Classic Amateurs here with magical alchemist Norman speaking, and I'm here with Raz. How are you doing today, Raz?
The sorcerer, the sorcerer Raz. I'm doing really well. It's 10 o'clock in Australia in Sydney. A bit tired, but very always very excited to talk to you. I hope you had a good lunch.
I had a brilliant lunch back here in Europe.
How are things?
Yeah, things are good. I'm excited for today's topic. I've been actively researching Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for today's topic, which is my case, as in strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And you are presenting Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
I was trying
Yeah.
to share a bunch of memes with you before, but I feel like our meme game is not the same, and we
As in,
misunderstood
I don't
each
have any
other.
meme game, and you have all the memes. You have thousands
Correct.
of followers on your fake Twitter account, and it just has memes. If I understand correctly.
Yes, that's how I'm gonna make millions, or this podcast, one or the other. So a lot depends on you as well. Yeah. Um,
How do you monetize creating
how do
memes?
I'm not sure yet. I have to figure it out. So that's something I haven't thought about yet.
First, build a community.
I ask for like cryptocurrencies. They can send me some, or get some Raid Shadow Legends sponsors. There are opportunities. You can make money.
That's not bad. Some
Says the
Lunas,
guy who doesn't make
some
any
Luna
money nowadays,
coins.
but yeah. So
No, you're
yeah,
trying. You're
let's
trying.
jump into it. Why don't we talk about change?
Which topic? I might start with the Metamorphosis because it's pretty straightforward.
Sure.
And it's really great to put these in parallel. Like, I think a lot of people are familiar with Franz Kafka's 1915 novel, The Metamorphosis. If you're not, it's this iconic piece. It's not even a novel, it's a novella. And everyone's heard the beginning. As Gregor Samsa woke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. If you haven't heard this, I'm very
I
surprised. I
feel
don't
you.
know where you've been living. Yeah, so just if I were to describe this novel, which I've read when I was a teenager, it's something that made me very uneasy reading because I just assumed it was allegorical to some extent. And I couldn't really get the point of it, but I was fascinated with its realism and its fantasy, which was almost playful. It has a certain playfulness about it, a certain self irony about it, and yeah, I couldn't really make sense of it. And in hindsight, researching it a bit more recently, it has multiple interpretations we can discuss. But do you want to present the novel that you had in mind around
Yeah,
metamorphosis and
absolutely.
change?
Because we are talking about change, and in your case, Gregor Samsa, the main protagonist of Metamorphosis, changes into a bug, um, and in my story, Dr. Jekyll changes into Mr. Hyde after drinking some bizarrely mixed cocktail, intentionally. Now, Jekyll and Hyde as a story is probably one of the few stories that almost everyone knows the punchline for. So I'm not going to spoil too much when I say Jekyll equals Hyde. It's the same guy, right? So that's the punchline. What's interesting about it is how these themes are developed. You have to symbolize
Hmm.
something. It cannot be just like a simple change. Or if it is, then you're called Ben 10. If you know that, that's
Oh,
a
tell
correct
me.
Zoomer reference. Another meme.
I actually didn't
Um,
get it, but tell me more about that. I'm actually let's dive into it. I'm
about
curious.
Ben 10 or Jekyll and Hyde? I'm happy to talk about both. So Jekyll and Hyde, it's a Gothic novel. It's considered to be part of the Gothic literature, written somewhere in the mid 19th century by a Scottish guy named Stevenson. Some say he woke up in the middle of a fever dream and was really sick while wrote it, which disappoints me greatly because I was very sick with COVID earlier this year, and I didn't write any phenomenal piece of work. I just laid there complaining. But apparently back then, people grabbed a pen and paper and produced
Should
something
have
phenomenal.
should have done some of the audio recording. I'm sure your voice would have. had a bit of creativity in it still.
Yeah, that's what we are doing now, right? So we
We're
are
just
we
too
are
lazy
doing
to
our
type, basically.
one thing I find fascinating about Jekyll and Hyde is like it was written in the Victorian era where everyone was super prudish and their morals and the levels of what they consider to be dangerous is very different from today. So the story itself starts off with this guy telling a story how he saw Edward Hyde, who's Jekyll's alter ego, trample over a little girl and then basically sort of demanded some payment in exchange so that he doesn't make a scandal. And Edward Hyde provided the payment, provided the money for the girl to recover, but it was in a
Who's that? Who's
check, and
that?
the check was Edward Hyde, Mr. Hyde, same
The
person,
the alter
Hyde,
ego.
Jekyll's alter ego. So Edward Hyde or Mr. Hyde provided the check to this little girl for her pain, but the check itself was signed by Dr. Jekyll. So that's where the first time the two persons connect. And until the very end, you don't realize that they are the same person. So there's an implication that when Dr. Jekyll drinks the potion, there's like an actual physical change occurring. And over the course of the story, Mr. Hyde becomes more and more violent, killing quite a few people. Um, the main crux of the story is beyond the whole gothic novel feeling is really the talk about the duality of man because it's the same person. You kind of like look at it not so much of like two characters, but rather than one character and two sides of the same character, if that makes sense. So Dr. Jekyll being the reasonable guy,
Mhm.
while Mr. Hyde being the murderous villain. What I found interesting about it, and we'll jump back to Kafka in a second, that Dr. Jekyll created the potion and wanted to become Dr. Hyde or Mr. Hyde. Sorry, I keep mixing it. He wanted to become Mr. Hyde so that he can relieve his vices. And when I think about vices, I think about like, sex and, dancing, partying, that sort of stuff. Apparently, the vices for him were murder. So, well, he does himself, you do you. So, and I guess that duality is in the center of the whole story. Well, in Kafka, right, Gregor Samsa changes into a bug involuntarily. He doesn't want to change into a bug, but he does.
Yeah, I can comment on that because I do see a similarity in the sense of so there's multiple interpretations to the metamorphosis. Long story short, Greg Samsa turns into this gigantic bug, becomes a burden to his family, which he otherwise supported by being a traveling salesman, and slowly but surely neglected up to the point where yeah, kind of gets forgotten and starved in his room. And the upside, his sister Greta is becoming more and more important to the family, up to the point I think there's kind of a conflict between them, and she emerges from that as being kind of the star of the family, and the parents start focusing on her and her prospects in life. That's kind of the whole story, and similar to so there are multiple interpretations around this the book. When I was reading, I thought it was a bit like because I read it right after the trial, but also by Kafka. And initially, I thought it was another description of kind of the alienation of modern man, 1915, before the First World War. I thought it was a symbol for that, but then just reading through a little bit, it sounds like there's some psychological element to it as well. And I don't know
Yeah.
if you wanted to touch upon that, but basically the main character of the book turns out might not be just Greg, but it might be maybe Greg and Greta in a sense, because on one hand you have an odd creature that gets disilluted out of starvation, the creative, and on the other hand you have Greta, which some picked up as a symbol of feminism, kind of slowly rising up through the ranks and being very, very interested in her societal prospects. And it's kind of duality between the creative and I don't know how to call that element of just being falling in line, respecting norms, respecting what your family expects of you. That duality that someone like Kafka would have felt as well. So very interesting that you pointed out duality sometimes in the same person. It might just be the author in this case.
I see. Because it's quite interesting that Greta represents you said feminism, which or
No,
female
well, not
empowerment.
feminism per se. It was picked
Yeah.
up by feminism, but definitely female empowerment. In
Mhm.
Jungian terms, that would be kind of the anima of the author, right? The strong feminine soul, so to speak, that
Uh-huh.
is a reflection of the strength of the character, especially a creator.
First step of feminine empowerment seems to be to crush the guys, literally, the crush the guy like a bug. Yeah, I was
Doesn't have
I
to be
was
that
thinking
way.
about this. It doesn't have to be, but it is how it is. And one thing I thought
At least
about
in the book.
is sure. One of the interpretation I know is that Gregor Samsa has always been a bug, as in, he was kind of abused by his family, what a family to be in. But, he just turned
Mm.
into a real one, like not just a metaphoric one after some time.
Mm.
Very deep.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. That that's
You know
the
what's
avenue
fun?
of father complex,
Yeah.
right? The conflict with, especially with the father, and not, being getting attention or credit, turn him into this ugly thing.
Absolutely. I mean, worth always noting that in the context of when he wrote it, there's probably a lot of other factors that we are not aware of anymore because it's been so long time ago. It was over 100 years ago, right? And I
Hmm.
see that with Jekyll and Hyde as well. While the most obvious interpretation is that man has a duality, the two wolves inside you. Essentially, that's the meme, right? That you have the good guy and the bad guy, and you kind of switch. In case of Jekyll and Hyde, a lot of people actually seen it as the duality of English and Scottish people. Now, the writer is Scottish, but apparently he sees Scots as a much more aggressive type of nation to England. Other people actually suggested that Jekyll and Hyde is a story about drug addiction because Jekyll is addicted to this serum and turns him worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big conflicts in Jekyll and Hyde's story is that initially Jekyll drinks the serum to become Hyde. Later on, however, the Hyde character keeps coming out without the serum, and now he needs the serum to turn back into his normal self. So that's kind of where a lot of the drug addiction metaphor is coming from, I think.
Mm.
I guess both stories are more important than the actual story itself. The story itself is not that interesting, in my opinion. I don't know how you feel about it, but the feelings you get from it and why it is important becomes a really good food for thoughts, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating and definitely worth revisiting to some extent, just because it allows, I guess, taking a step back. What's the benefit of reading books like this? It allows you kind of an introspection into yourself, right? And kind of questioning your own dualities, your shadow, your it, and as you put it in Freudian terms, and also your ego and how you position against society, civilized society, Victorian society, or Bohemian society if you're a Kafka in Prague, and
Hmm.
always being mindful that one has both, and there's always going to be a tension between the two.
Yeah,
Fascinating how these two things have this amazing parallel. Yeah,
yeah.
worth the read.
It's definitely two sides of the same coin. I guess two sides of the same double coin because double it's complicated. Another fun fact I learned is that Jekyll and Hyde actually inspired the Incredible Hulk. The superhero Hulk is based on Jekyll and Hyde. And I started to wonder maybe Metamorphosis inspired Ant Man or one of
Maybe the
those.
whole class of superheroes, and especially the really good ones, are the ones, arguably, I'd say, like Batman. Batman is great because, well, I don't know. He's definitely got a
You see,
really big shadow, right, on the when he's himself, and then he's hiding all the time, and then when he's out there, he's trying to protect the law, but he's clearly suffering himself from the guilt of some of the things he's doing. And there's something about great superheroes that always have that dark side, I find.
the duality of
Um,
superheroes is similar to what duality we see with Jekyll and Hyde and Gregor Samsa and the Bug. I guess that's ideally not someone that changes shapes when he or she wants to or not want to, right? That would be pretty
Bugman,
scary. I don't know if I would bother
Doctor
turn into a
Bugman.
bug if. would you, if someone gives you like someone tells you like, hey, you can be a superhero, but your ability will be to turn into a bug. Like, would you feel like doing it, or would you be like, I'm good. I just want to be like a casual guy standing around.
This sounds like an episode of The Boys.
Yeah, like you could
Everyone's a
be,
superhero with
how,
funny powers.
yeah, like you can be, how ants can lift like 110 times of their weight. Like you could be a full-sized ant, like a human ant, an
Like Ant-Man.
Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Hey, and you could,
That
but
exists,
Ant-Man
right?
is always shrinking. In this case, it's like you could have like super strength because you can lift 110 times of your weight, right? So I don't know if I would do it. It would feel weird. It's very difficult to score chicks while you look like a bug. I feel like it's
Yeah, unless they're bug
limited.
chicks.
Unless they are bug
You have
chasers.
to
Hey,
adjust your adjust your universe.
do you know what a bug
Awesome.
chaser is?
No, I don't.
Okay, don't look it up. Don't look up before you go to bed. Maybe look it up when you're a bit happy and you're looking for a bit of
Well,
balance.
make sure you put an
Yeah,
explicit label on this episode.
we'll definitely put an explicit label
Okay,
because
cool.
wow,
Let's wrap
we
up. How
we
do
made
we
it.
wrap this up and do a call to action for everybody listening?
I think if you ever find yourself waking up as a bug, definitely call help. Or if you find a serum that turns you into a bug or someone else, I
Or a
consider not taking it.
murderer,
A murderer.
like the case of Jekyll.
Or a
Just don't
Scott.
do it.
In this
Stay off
case,
the juice. Take it easy on the
actually,
juice.
here's the one. Here's one.
Mm.
You find a serum, and when you drink it, you turn into a Scottish person.
Then you want to
That,
vote at a referendum that you want to join the EU
but maybe, or you
or
just
something.
write
Whatever
Gothic
Scottish
horror
people
stories.
do.
Whatever Scottish people. We love Scottish people, by the way. No harsh feelings. Just say. Um, cool, awesome. I don't really know how to wrap this up other than it's both of these are classic stories and they are reasonably short. So actually, I think you could easily read both of them. I think Jekyll and Hyde is actually, what is it called, like not copyrighted anymore, so you can actually just get it for free.
Just find it.
Unless,
Probably Kafka as well. I mean, it's been more than 100 years.
yeah, most likely. So, or you
How
can
long
just
are these copyright
find them
laws for?
very long. That's the
Yeah, we
answer.
won't give you
But
any free sources. We will give you only paid suggestions.
so you can support us. Yeah, all right.
Anyway,
That's
okay,
that's
cool.
kind of,
I really enjoyed
hey,
this brief episode. It was good to chat, and I actually feel like I learned something. I didn't realize how close these two were, sort of in these shared themes. I love the
very
pairing,
close,
like a
and you can
good
see it
wine
on the
and a
screen.
good piece of cheese.
Yeah, or two podcast hosts, the duality, two sides of the same coin.
You and me.
I'll
Who's
be
Jekyll? Who's
Jekyll.
Hyde?
Uh, okay, all right. That's it.
Jekyll.
All right, take care.
Jacko.
Bye bye.